My name is Margaret Townsend. I'm 78 years old, born and raised in a small town called Willow Creek, nestled in the quiet arms of Oregon. I was a retired librarian, once proud of the life I built with nothing but grit, patience, and an unwavering love for family. I'd lived a humble, honest life, until the day I found out that the man I called my husband for 21 years, Joseph Townsend, was never in love with me. He was paid by my daughter-in-law, Carla. You heard that right. My own daughter-in-law, the woman married to my only son, handed my husband a check to seduce me, marry me, and strip away everything I had worked for. My land, my savings, my dignity. And he did it with the smile of a lover and the charm of a saint. They thought I was too old and too soft to ever figure it out. But they didn't know I had already seen the bank statement. I had already heard the phone call she forgot to delete. I had already met the lawyer. So that evening, as Carla laughed across the dinner table, pretending to feed me cake on my birthday while Joseph poured the wine, I stood up. My hands trembled not from age, but from rage. You both think I'm stupid, I said quietly. They froze. I know you paid him, Carla. I know about the offshore account. And Joseph, I turned to him slowly, you married me for a check. But now, you'll lose everything. And just like that, I dropped the folder on the table. Bank records, phone transcripts, and the deed I had transferred without telling a soul. I watched their faces drain of color like water circling a drain. But just as I turned to leave the room, I heard Joseph whisper something that made my spine go cold. You think it's over, Margaret, he said with a calm that made my bones ache. You haven't seen what we're willing to do next. I froze at the door. What had I just unleashed? Let me take you back to the beginning. Before I ever met Joseph, before Carla ever entered our lives, before betrayal became the only language my family spoke. My life wasn't always coated in secrets and venom. At 56, I had already survived breast cancer, the sudden death of my first husband, and the heartbreak of raising a son, Martin, who grew into a man I barely recognized. After my first husband, Dennis, passed away, I poured everything I had into my son. He was bright and kind at first. But when he met Carla, something changed. Carla was the kind of woman who could freeze a summer day just by walking into the room. She had perfect nails, perfect lies, and a laugh that never reached her eyes. From the moment they got engaged, she called me Mags, even though I hated it. She moved into my home, rearranged everything, and spoke to me like I was an old rug left on the porch. But I endured. Why? Because Martin was happy. Or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there. Carla didn't love Martin, she loved money. She pushed him into risky investments. She borrowed against their home. She got her name on accounts she never deserved. But Martin kept defending her. Mom, she's just trying to help us grow, he'd say with that blank look in his eyes. What he didn't realize was, Carla wasn't growing anything. She was slowly digging a hole. For me. The day she suggested I find companionship again was the day I should have known something was brewing. It was a sunny afternoon. She brought me tea in a porcelain cup, uncharacteristically sweet. I know a gentleman you might like, Mags, she chirped, adjusting her pearl earrings. He's widowed, kind, educated, thoughtful, and very interested in meeting you. I laughed. I hadn't dated since the 80s. I was tired, a little wrinkled, and still wore the wedding ring of my first love. But something in Carla's smile was so convincing, and so sinister. 3 weeks later I met Joseph. He was tall, well-spoken, with silver hair combed neatly and shoes that always seemed new. He told me he'd been a professor. We bonded over literature. And strangely, he listened. Really listened. It was a warm feeling I hadn't felt in decades. For the first time in years I felt seen. But something didn't feel right. He was always at the right place. He always said the right things. He moved in sync with my fears and hopes. Almost like he'd been briefed on who I was. But I dismissed it. I told myself, Margaret, maybe you deserve this. Maybe life is finally being kind. 2 months into dating, he proposed. Carla squealed with excitement, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. Martin didn't even look surprised. And like a fool wrapped in hope, I said yes. The wedding was small. Just them, a priest, and a few distant friends. It rained the morning of the ceremony. Maybe that was God crying. Changed my will. I gave him access to accounts. I even added him to the deed of the house. Because that's what you do when you believe someone loves you. But love, I would soon find out, was not what Joseph had for me. It began slowly. He suggested I take more naps. He offered to handle the mail. He started driving me everywhere, even when I didn't ask. One day I found my blood pressure pills missing. When I asked Carla, she said, "You probably forgot you took them." Things started vanishing. Receipts, jewelry, bank statements, even my diary. And then I overheard a conversation between Joseph and Carla. On a day they thought I was asleep on the porch. "She's not gonna live much longer," Carla said, her voice sharp. "Don't say that," Joseph replied, but there was no panic in his voice. "She's tougher than she looks." "I paid you to speed things up," she snapped. "Don't make me regret this." I felt the world tilt beneath me. The teacup slipped from my hand. Froze. Paid to marry me. Paid to help me die. My stomach churned. But I didn't let them know I heard. Not yet. Instead, I smiled wider. Baked more pies. I pretended to forget more often. Played their game. 'Cause I needed time. I called an old friend, Howard, a retired lawyer who owed me a favor from a long-ago charity case. I told him everything. We formed a plan. I started keeping duplicates of every financial paper. I recorded conversations. I set up cameras in the living room. I told my neighbor, Elise, to check in if she didn't see me for more than a day. And then, the final blow came. One morning I opened my banking app and saw the transfer. $300,000 gone. Sent to an offshore account. The same account Carla had visited during a girls' trip to the Bahamas. My blood ran cold. That was my life savings. The money Dennis left for our grandchildren. The same account Joseph had convinced me to let him help manage. It was gone. I ran to Joseph, shaking. "Where's the money?" He blinked. "What money, Maggie?" I turned to Martin. "Your wife did this. She planned this." Martin looked at me like I was insane. "You're confused, Mom. Carla would never." That's when I knew. He was in on it too. That night I didn't sleep. I packed the evidence. Contacted the bank. I signed new legal documents with Howard. And on the morning of my 78th birthday, I walked into my kitchen, kissed them both on the cheek and said, "Let's have dinner tonight." I wore my best dress. I made my favorite meal. And after we ate, I dropped the folder on the table. That was just the beginning. But as Joseph threatened me at the door, something told me this wasn't over. What would they do now that they'd been exposed? Would they let me live? Would Martin stand by and watch them destroy me again? Or would I have to destroy them first? To be continued. If this story shocked you, touched your heart, or made you think twice about who you trust, like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will leave you breathless. I didn't sleep that night. After Joseph hissed those words, "You haven't seen what we're willing to do next," I sat on the edge of my bed, fully clothed, heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. The house was too quiet, like it was waiting for something dreadful to happen. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window made my fingers tighten around the edge of the sheets. I wasn't scared. I was something deeper than scared. I was aware. Aware that I was living with enemies under my roof. Aware that the man sleeping in the next room had held my hand and kissed my forehead for over 2 decades, all while counting down the days until my account drained dry. But what Joseph and Carla didn't know was that I had already changed the locks on the estate deed. They had no idea that the new will I signed last month left everything to someone else. Someone they didn't even know existed. And yet, a whisper lingered in my head like a parasite. What if they weren't done? What if this wasn't just about money anymore? What if they wanted me gone? Permanently. The next morning I played the part. I came downstairs in my housecoat, slippers scuffing softly along the hardwood, and greeted them both with a smile. "Coffee, dear," I offered Joseph, who was staring down at his phone like he always did when plotting. He looked up at me and forced a smile. "Sure. Thanks, sweetheart." Sweetheart. It was always those endearments that cut the deepest. Carla didn't say a word. She was standing by the kitchen sink, arms crossed. Her eyes locked on me like a predator trying to decide if its prey was still weak or suddenly dangerous. I noticed it immediately. Her diamond ring was gone. The same one Martin gave her. The one she always flaunted. I followed her eyes. She was watching me. Studying me. She knew. She knew I had found out everything. That day I visited the police. Not to file a report, yet, but to speak to Detective Layla Moore, someone I had taught as a child in Sunday school. She was kind but firm, smart and sharp-eyed. I told her everything, with evidence in a sealed envelope. "If anything happens to me," I told her, "this folder explains who, how, and why." She took it without hesitation. "I'll keep my eye on them," she promised. "But be careful, Margaret. These people, they're desperate." He nodded. Desperation was a dangerous thing. But so was a woman who had nothing left to lose. When I got home, I pretended everything was fine. Baked cookies. I folded towels. I even asked Joseph to help me plant new roses in the front garden. Every move I made was calculated. That evening I asked Martin to come by. I had to see him. Alone. My son looked different now. Not in the face. He still had Dennis' nose and my eyes, but in the way he moved. Like he carried a secret too big for his shoulders. I invited him for dinner, just the two of us. Carla didn't like that, but I insisted. He arrived wearing a new leather jacket. I wondered how he could afford it when he'd told me just last week that money was tight. I served him his favorite meal, beef stew with buttermilk biscuits, and sat across the table watching him eat. "Martin," I said gently, "do you remember the swing set in the backyard when you were little?" He looked up, caught off guard. Yeah, I remember." "Why?" "You used to cry every time you fell. But every time I picked you up you'd say, 'Try again, Mommy.'" He smiled a little. "I was a persistent kid." "You were," I said. "You were good. Honest. Brave." He shifted in his seat. I took a deep breath. "What happened to you?" His smile vanished. "Mom, don't do this." "I have to," I said, my voice cracking. "Because I need to believe that somewhere inside you, that little boy still exists." His eyes hardened. "You don't understand what Carla and I have been through." "Then help me," I whispered. "Help me understand." For a moment he looked like he might cry. His lips parted. Then just as quickly he pulled back. "You don't know what it's like," he said bitterly. "You always had it easy, sitting on that money, living in a paid-off house. Carla and I have debts. Real ones. She just wanted to make things right. By stealing from your mother." He didn't answer. I leaned in closer. "Did you know she paid Joseph to marry me?" He flinched. "That told me everything." "I didn't know at first," he said slowly. "But when I found out, I didn't stop it. Because it was already done." Tears welled in my eyes. "You could have said something. You could have warned me." "And then what?" he snapped. "Lose Carla. Lose everything we were building." "You lost your soul instead," I said softly. He stood up, unable to face me. "I shouldn't have come," he muttered. "Martin." I reached for him, but he pulled away. He left without finishing his food. That was the last time I saw the boy I raised. The next time I'd see him, he'd be standing beside a lawyer, fighting for what wasn't his. That night Joseph confronted me. He'd seen Martin leaving. He must have known we talked. "You shouldn't have told him," he said, standing in my bedroom doorway like a shadow. "He's already fragile." I stared at him. "You mean he's already broken, just like you?" He stepped inside slowly. "You've made this harder than it had to be, Margaret. And you've made this crueler than I could have imagined." He paused. What if I said I wanted to fix this? I laughed bitterly. With what? Another check from Carla. His face darkened. Be careful. No, Joseph, I said, rising from my bed. You be careful. Because I've already filed power of attorney with someone you'll never find. I've already blocked the accounts. And the deed. You're not on it anymore. He stared at me in stunned silence. That's right, I said. You didn't marry a helpless old woman. You married a storm. He turned and walked away, but not before whispering, You'll regret this. The next morning my car tires were slashed. 2 nights later, I found my bedroom window open. I never leave it open. Then came the anonymous note on my kitchen counter. Old women fall all the time. I stared at it for a long time. No signature. No handwriting I recognized. Just the cold threat of it all. Was Joseph losing control? Or was Carla finally stepping into the light? Called Detective Layla. She came by, saw the note, took fingerprints. I need you to consider staying elsewhere, she warned. Just for a few days. He nodded. But where could I go? My friends were too far. Hotels were traceable. I had no family I could trust. Except one person. Secret no one knew. And as I packed my overnight bag with shaking hands, I whispered aloud to myself. It's time she knew the truth. I picked up the phone and called the number I'd hidden in my desk drawer for 35 years. The woman on the other end answered after 2 rings. Hello. My voice trembled. Hi. It's Margaret. I'm your mother. A long silence. Then. What? But before I could explain, I heard the back door slam. Someone was inside the house. If your heart is racing and your mind is filled with questions, you're not alone. Don't miss what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will change everything. I stood frozen, phone still pressed to my ear. The back door had slammed shut. Not creaked. Not swung. Blam. Which meant one thing. Someone wasn't trying to sneak in anymore. They wanted me to know they were here. Mom. The woman's voice on the other end of the call said again. Did you say? I have to call you back, I whispered quickly, then ended the call before she could reply. I pressed my back against the wall of my bedroom and listened. A step, heavy, and hurried, coming through the kitchen. They didn't know I was still upstairs. I grabbed the old wooden cane I kept by my dresser, not for walking but for reaching high cabinets. I gripped it tightly, my pulse thudding in my ears. There was a creak outside my room. Then silence. I moved quietly, slowly, toward the closet. I'd installed a small latch behind the coat rack years ago, something even Joseph didn't know about. I slipped inside, pressing my body between winter coats and the locked safe I'd hidden behind old boxes. I didn't dare breathe. The bedroom door opened. I saw the shadow move along the floor. Someone was inside my room. The footsteps circled up, and then walked out. The front door slammed next. Whoever it was. They wanted to scare me. And it worked. My hands shook as I stepped out of the closet. But I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I reached for my phone and called Detective Layla again. They were here, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. They came into my house. She arrived within 15 minutes, this time with 2 officers. They searched the property, found the back door forced open with a screwdriver, and muddy footprints leading toward the woods behind the house. No fingerprints, no witnesses. They're escalating, she said gravely. I know who it is, I replied. Or at least, I know who sent them. But that wasn't what haunted me the most. What haunted me was the voice I heard just before the call ended, the voice of the woman I had kept hidden my entire life. Her name was Evelyn. She was my daughter. Had a daughter. Long before Martin was born. Her father was a boy I loved at 19. We were young. He vanished when I told him I was pregnant. My parents, deeply religious, rigid, forced me to give the baby up for adoption. I never saw her again. Until 20 years ago, when she reached out. She had tracked me down, found me through a state agency. We exchanged letters. I even met her once in secret. But I never told Martin. Never told anyone. It was the one thing I kept for myself. And now, I needed her. I needed someone whose blood I could trust. I called Evelyn the next morning. This time I told her everything. The fake marriage. The stolen money. The threats. Carla. Joseph. And why I never told her the truth sooner. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said, "Give me your address." By nightfall she was at my door. When I opened it and saw her, tall, elegant with my cheekbones and Dennis eyes, I couldn't hold back the tears. She hugged me, tightly, without judgment. "You should have called me sooner," she whispered. "I was ashamed," I replied. "Well," she said, stepping inside, "you're not alone anymore." I introduced her to Layla the next morning. The three of us sat at the dining table and planned everything. Because now it was time for the truth to come out. I had already filed a civil complaint, but Layla warned me. Criminal cases took time. The evidence was strong, but the offshore accounts complicated everything. And that's when Evelyn made a suggestion I never expected. "Let's make it public." "What do you mean?" "Yes. Press charges. But also expose them. Let the world see who they are." Sounded risky. Sounded dangerous. But it also sounded right. Because silence had only ever protected them. So we began gathering every shred of evidence. Emails. Voice messages. Joseph's forged signatures. Carla's wire transfers. Evelyn hired a forensic accountant, an old friend, who traced the missing $300,000 through a maze of shell companies, all linked back to Carla's brother. Martin, meanwhile, had gone silent. Not a call. Not a visit. Until one afternoon I got a voicemail. "Mom, I need to see you. Alone. Please. It's important." My heart dropped. Was he trying to make peace? Or was it a trap? Evelyn and Layla both advised me not to go alone. But something in me needed to see him. So I agreed, but on my terms. We met at a public park. He was already waiting by a bench, dressed in worn jeans and a hoodie, a man weathered by guilt. When I sat down, he looked at me with tears already in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "Not all of it. I swear." I stared at him. "What didn't you know, Martin? That Carla paid Joseph to marry your mother. That they tried to kill me." His lips trembled. "She told me it was just a setup. That Joseph would charm you into signing over the house so we could get a loan. She said you wouldn't suffer. And when I almost died from a missing blood pressure pill, what then?" He covered his face with his hands. I didn't know it was this deep. I let him cry. But I didn't forgive him. Not yet. "I'm pressing charges," I said. "And I'm taking everything back. You won't see a cent. Neither will Carla." He nodded slowly. "I'll testify," he whispered. "I'll give you everything I know." I left without hugging him. That night, Evelyn and I went through the last of the paperwork. The next morning I sent everything to Layla and my lawyer. And that evening, it began. Public press release. News headlines across town. Elderly woman files lawsuit against husband and daughter-in-law for fraud. Attempted murder. The story exploded. Joseph was arrested the next day. Carla vanished. But not for long. Because 3 days later, someone smashed Evelyn's car windows. The next night we found a dead bird nailed to my front door. The morning after, an unmarked car was parked across the street. Watching. Waiting. They weren't going down without a fight. But neither were we. And then one night at exactly 3:11 a.m. the house phone rang. Answered groggy. There was silence. Then a low whisper. "You should have stayed quiet, Margaret. You've just made it worse for yourself." I stood up, fully awake now. "Who is this?" I demanded. But the call ended. The next day, Evelyn's forensic accountant disappeared. Vanished. No messages. No answers. Then I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside it was a single USB stick. Plugged it in. There, in grainy footage, was Carla. Meeting with a man I recognized. A man I had once trusted. My lawyer. To be continued. If this chapter gripped your heart and left you gasping, wait till you see what's coming in next chapter. Like, comment, and subscribe. Justice is just getting started. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. There in plain sight was my lawyer, James Whittaker, shaking hands with Carla in the back of some shady cafe like they were longtime partners in crime. He smiled at her the way you only smile at someone you know. And oh, for 20 years James had handled my estate, my trust, my power of attorney. I trusted him with more than my money. I trusted him with my future. And now here he was, slipping her an envelope and patting her on the shoulder like a proud father. Pressed pause. The rage hit me like a wave. I had built my life on trust. And now every person I had let in was a splinter wedged under my skin. "Evelyn!" shouted. She rushed into the room, breathless. "What is it?" I showed her the video. She watched it once, twice, and on the third loop she said, "This was taken just 4 days ago. Look at the date on the screen. 4 days ago. That was after I filed the civil complaint. After James assured me, face to face, that he was with me all the way. He lied. He'd been feeding her everything. I had no one left in the legal system I could trust. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She folded her arms and said, "Then we bring this to Layla. First thing in the morning. And we keep moving." He nodded. But my stomach was in knots. If James was part of it. How deep did this web go? We didn't wait until morning. We drove straight to Layla's house. She opened the door in her pajamas, no makeup, hair up in a frizzy bun. But the moment she saw our faces, she didn't ask questions. She let us in. We showed her the footage. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she picked up her phone and made 2 calls, one to her supervisor, and one to a trusted FBI contact she knew from her early days in the force. "This is bigger than local," she said. "If Whittaker's involved, this could be organized financial crime. Possibly multiple victims." She promised to protect us. She promised to act fast. But later that night, as Evelyn and I sat by the fire, she looked at me and said quietly, "You know this might not end in court, right?" He nodded. "This is personal for them now," I whispered. "And people who feel exposed are dangerous." Evelyn's phone pinged. She picked it up, frowned, and then handed it to me. It was a picture of us sitting by the fire, taken from outside the house. No message, no number, just the photo. It called Layla. This time she didn't just send a patrol car. She came herself with 2 officers who stood guard outside the house all night. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. We just waited. And somewhere in the middle of that long, cold silence, I remembered something. The last conversation I'd had with Dennis, my first husband before he died. We were sitting in the backyard watching the stars. He'd turned to me and said, "Margaret, you're stronger than any storm. But strength doesn't mean staying silent. Sometimes it means standing up, screaming if you have to, until the world listens." I never understood that until now. The next day we drove to the FBI office. Layla met us there and personally walked us through the process. They reviewed the footage, asked questions about Whittaker's involvement, requested bank documents, and assigned a federal investigator to the case. "This is now a federal matter," the agent said. "We'll take it from here. But you need to understand, Carla and Joseph aren't just gold diggers. They're part of something organized. This could take time." "Time is what I don't have," I snapped. "They tried to kill me." He nodded. "Which is why we'll be assigning protection. Effective immediately." That night, we were relocated to a safe house. It was small, plain, and tucked away in a quiet suburb 2 hours from Willow Creek. A pair of unmarked SUVs sat outside, rotating shifts. Evelyn and I shared a room, and every creak of the floor made me jolt. I missed my garden, my books, my porch swing. But I didn't miss the fear that came with living under the same roof as vipers. 2 days passed. Then a break in the case. The forensic accountant who had disappeared. He resurfaced. He showed up at the FBI office. Bloodied, bruised, but alive. Said he'd been kidnapped. They'd held him in a basement. Took his phone. Beat him when he refused to delete files. But he'd hidden backups. Unencrypted drives. Stored in a lockbox at a bank Carla didn't even know about. Those files. They revealed everything. Carla's trail of fraud stretched back 15 years. 3 elderly women, 1 dead, 2 hospitalized, had left their fortunes to new husbands in suspiciously similar ways. All connected. All orchestrated by Carla. Joseph wasn't her only puppet. He was just the one who got too close. And Whitaker. He'd helped process every fraudulent will. Every single one. My stomach turned. I was nearly one of them. The FBI moved fast. Arrest warrants were issued. Carla was declared a fugitive. Joseph was transferred to a federal holding facility. Whitaker was picked up at his country club, still sipping martinis. But just when I thought the storm was passing, hit harder. Martin. He'd been arrested too. Accessory to fraud. Complicity in financial manipulation. Tampering with elder care documents. He called me from jail. Mom, please. Please tell them I didn't know. I didn't mean for any of this. I stared at the wall as his voice cracked through the phone. Please help me, Mom. I'm your son. I didn't say a word. He begged. Hung up. Felt numb. This was my child. My blood. But he had stood by while they drained me. Watched as they tried to break me. And now the truth was out, but the damage was permanent. That night, Evelyn sat beside me on the couch and took my hand. You did it, she said softly. You stood up. You screamed. I didn't want to scream, I said. I just wanted peace. And just as the tears began to fall, there was a knock at the door. The FBI agent on duty checked through the peephole. It's your lawyer, he said. Your new one. I didn't have a new one. My heart stopped. I stood slowly, looked through the peephole myself. It was a woman. Blonde. Sunglasses. I didn't recognize her. But when the agent opened the door, gun ready, she held up a badge. FBI. Margaret Townsend, she asked. He nodded. We need to speak. Privately. He hesitated. About what? She took off her sunglasses. Carla's been found, she said. But she wasn't alone. I stared at her, ice crawling up my spine. Who was with her? Yes. She looked me in the eyes. Someone you trusted. Someone very close. To be continued. If this chapter hit you like a punch to the gut, wait until next chapter. The betrayal isn't over. The revenge hasn't even begun. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the storm that's still coming. The woman's words sliced through the air like a razor. Someone very close. I stood there at the threshold, my breath caught halfway to my lungs, heart thudding like a warning bell. The FBI agent, her badge now clearly visible, gestured to the living room. Please, Mrs. Townsend. We need to talk inside. I glanced at Evelyn. Her jaw was clenched, eyes already brimming with suspicion. We stepped inside and the agent, Agent Monroe, sat down across from us. She reached into her folder and pulled out 2 photographs. She placed them face down on the table, then turned them over slowly. The first one, Carla. Sitting in a hotel room. Handcuffed. She looked smug. Unbothered. Like it was all part of her plan. But it was the second photo that stole the ground from under my feet. Elise. My neighbor. My best friend. The woman I played cards with every Thursday. The one who brought me soup when I was sick, helped me prune my rose bushes, called me Maggie with warmth that felt like honey. She was sitting beside Carla. Laughing. My knees buckled. Evelyn rushed to my side, catching me before I hit the floor. No, 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 not Elise, I murmured. She's not, no, not her. Agent Monroe waited. She had that FBI stillness, the kind that didn't flinch at human pain. I'm sorry, Mrs. Townsend, she said quietly. But Elise was in on it. We have phone records. financial transfers, video surveillance. She was Carla's eyes and ears the entire time. My mind reeled. It made sense now. How Elise had always known when Joseph was gone, how she told me once to leave the mail to Joseph, he's got it under control, how she'd warned me not to change my will too fast. All of it. Every shared cup of tea. Every laugh on the porch. Lie. I felt violated all over again. Evelyn was trembling beside me. So what now? Monroe folded her hands. Carla struck a deal. She gave up Elise. Gave up Whitaker. She's trying to lessen her sentence. Of course she is, I spat. She always knew how to survive. Like a cockroach in the dark. Monroe continued. But here's the thing. There's still one more name she hasn't revealed. Blinked. What do you mean? She said there's someone else involved. Someone higher up. Someone who introduced her to the idea of marrying into money. A mentor of sorts. I shook my head. This woman is evil. She's trying to twist the knife before she goes down. Maybe, Monroe said. But we're taking it seriously. And we need your help. She leaned forward. We need you to talk to her. I recoiled. Absolutely not. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. She'll only speak to you. She asked for you specifically. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. 'Cause I was furious. Elise, my own neighbor. That betrayal hurt even more than Joseph's. I kept replaying moments in my mind. The time she said Carla wasn't so bad. The time she said Joseph seemed like a good man. She wasn't trying to comfort me. She was planting seeds. They all were. They thought I was weak, lonely. But what they didn't realize was, I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. The next morning I agreed to meet Carla. The prison was gray, bitter cold, and smelled like bleach and hopelessness. I walked in, accompanied by 2 agents. They left me at the glass partition and sat nearby, watching closely. Carla walked in like she was entering a spa. Her jumpsuit was baggy, but she strutted in it like it was couture. She picked up the phone on her side of the glass. I hesitated, then picked up mine. He smirked. Maggie, you look strong. Don't call me that, I snapped. He chuckled. Fine. Margaret, you win. I didn't come here for games. You said there's someone else. She leaned forward, her smile faltering. For the first time she looked tired. You think I'm the villain, Margaret. But you were just the latest chapter. I said nothing. There's a network, she whispered. Women like me. We're recruited. Taught how to find targets. Elderly people with no real family. Lonely people. Sick people. You name it. Joseph was part of this network. No, he was mine. I brought him in. But the idea, the model, came from someone else. She taught me everything. She. Carla nodded. Her name's Lorraine Finch. She used to work in elder care law. Found loopholes. Created power of attorney traps. She doesn't marry anyone. She just trains people like me to do it. Where is she? Carla smirked. That's where my leverage ends. I'm not giving her up without a deal. Clenched my jaw. You tortured people. Ruined lives. You think anyone cares about cutting you a deal? Carla's eyes narrowed. You're emotional, Margaret. That's why you lost your son. I slammed the phone down. I stood up, walked away. But her words echoed behind me like a gunshot. That's why you lost your son. That night, Evelyn and I sat in silence on the porch of the safe house. I want to end this, I said. She looked at me. Then let's do it. How? She thought for a moment. Then said, we take it public. Again. But this time with names. Carla. Elise. Whitaker. Lorraine. But we don't have Lorraine's info. Then we find it. And so we did. With Layla's help, Evelyn dug deeper. We followed paper trails. Licenses. Real estate transactions. Names on shell companies. Until finally, we found a property in Nevada. Owned by a shell company. tied to Lorraine Finch. A woman in her late 60s. Still practicing consulting under the radar. No social media. No real photos online. But we had her. The FBI raided the property a week later. Inside. Binders. Dozens. Each one labeled with a name and a timeline. Photos. Birthdays. Medical histories. It was a playbook of elderly targets. Hundreds of them. She'd built an empire. And Carla. Just one of her students. But Lorraine wasn't there. She'd vanished. And then something happened I didn't expect. Martin was released. Bail. I didn't even know until I saw him standing on the porch of the safe house. His eyes were sunken. Clothes wrinkled. A shell of a man. "Mom," he said. I didn't move. I didn't know about Lorraine. Swear. I just thought Carla was desperate for us to have a better life. I didn't know how deep it went. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and pretend none of this happened. But I couldn't. "You stood by while she used me," I said. "You watched me crumble. You defended her." He broke down in tears. Evelyn stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go inside, Mom." But as we turned to go in, a car screeched to a halt down the road. A woman stepped out. She was tall. Gray hair. Wrinkled face. Expensive coat. She raised her hands. And shouted, "Margaret Townsend, I want to talk. I'm Lorraine Finch." To be continued. If your jaw dropped just now, you're not alone. Next chapter will reveal the secrets behind the queen pin of the whole scheme. Like, comment, and subscribe because the game is far from over. She stood there in the middle of the road like a ghost summoned from my worst nightmare. Lorraine Finch. Her name had been whispered in court documents and FBI meetings, tucked in files marked confidential, spoken about in fear and disgust. And now there she was in the flesh. Tall, smug, calm. Not handcuffed. Not escorted. Just standing there. As if this was her home, her stage. Froze. Evelyn moved to step in front of me, but I put my hand on her shoulder. "No," I whispered. "Let her speak." Agent Monroe was already on the phone, calling for backup. 2 other agents came rushing out of the safe house, guns holstered but ready. Lorraine kept her hands up. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she said, her voice chillingly polite. "I just want to talk to Margaret. Woman to woman." I stepped forward, shaking but composed. "You don't get to call me that." She smiled softly like I was amusing. "I knew you'd be impressive. That's why you lasted so long." "Lasted," I repeated. She nodded. "Carla was supposed to be done with you in 18 months. But you're tougher than you look. That's why I came. I want to see you before the empire I built comes crashing down." The agents moved closer. "Ma'am, you're under investigation. Hands where we can see them." Lorraine sighed. "Relax. Have no weapons. Just truths." One agent placed her in cuffs, finally, and read her rights. She didn't resist. She looked me in the eyes as they began to lead her away. "You're the one who broke it, you know. My system. My girls. I trained them better than the CIA. And you, some old woman in Oregon, tore it all apart." "I'm not some old woman," I said. "I'm the last mistake you'll ever make." Her face hardened, then softened again. "But I wasn't your first betrayal, was I? Tell me, have you told Evelyn the whole truth yet?" Flinched. Evelyn stepped forward. "What truth?" Lorraine grinned. "Oh, she hasn't told you about your father, has she?" Everything went still. Lorraine continued as the agents tugged her back toward the car. "Tell her, Margaret. Tell her what you did. Or I will." The car door slammed. And she was gone. Evelyn turned to me, trembling. "What is she talking about?" I couldn't speak. Not then. But I knew I'd have to. That night, we sat at the table, the weight of Lorraine's words filling every corner of the room. Evelyn didn't say much. She was waiting. I stared down at the mug in my hands, the tea inside long gone cold. "You deserve the truth," I finally said. I've been keeping it for too long. She nodded once, silently giving me permission. Your father was not a bad man, I began. But he wasn't ready. We were teenagers. He panicked when I told him I was pregnant. Ran off. His parents shipped him out to another state. I didn't hear from him again. Evelyn's eyes glistened. I tried to find him later. But when I did, he was already married. With another family. He begged me not to tell anyone about you. Said it would ruin his life. And you agreed? She asked, her voice cracking. He nodded. I wanted you to have a normal childhood. Family. Chance. I thought staying away would protect you. She looked away. I needed you, Mom. All those years. I needed a mother. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I never stopped thinking about you. I watched you grow from afar. When you reached out that day, it was the happiest and hardest moment of my life. She sat in silence for a long while, then finally said, I believe you. But don't lie to me again. I won't, I promised. Not ever. We sat there, two women piecing together the broken edges of our past. But the war wasn't over. The next morning Layla came with news. Lorraine's refusing to cooperate. She says she'll only speak on one condition. I braced myself. What? She wants to make a statement at a press conference. With you present. Why me? Because she wants to destroy you before she falls, Layla said. She wants to twist the narrative. Frame you as the villain. I swallowed hard. Then let her talk, I said. You're sure? He nodded. Yes. Let her dig her own grave. The conference was scheduled for 2 days later. Reporters gathered like vultures. The courthouse steps packed with media, locals, and onlookers. Lorraine stood in her orange jumpsuit, flanked by guards, with a smirk still clinging to her face like cheap perfume. She looked into the cameras. I've been accused of running a criminal enterprise, she began. But no one's asking the real question. Why did these people fall for it? Why did Margaret Townsend sign over her fortune to a man she barely knew? 'Cause she was weak, lonely, and greedy in her own way. She wanted love and comfort. She paid for it with her blind trust. I stood to the side, silent, watching the cameras zoom in. But the real criminal, Lorraine continued, isn't me. It's the system. The laws that let elderly women hoard wealth and power and then cry when someone smarter comes along. People like Margaret. That's when I stepped forward. I walked right up to the podium, ignoring the shouts from security. The crowd gasped. Cameras turned. Lorraine stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. I may be old, I said into the mic, but I'm not stupid. And I'm not ashamed of wanting love. What I am ashamed of is people like you, who think kindness is a weakness and trust is a trap. You used my heart against me. But you forgot one thing, Lorraine. When women like me stand up, we burn down everything you've built. The crowd roared. Lorraine's face turned to stone. She was dragged away, finally silenced. The press conference made national news. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Until the next morning, when I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside it was a photo of me standing at my husband Dennis' grave. And behind me, a shadowy figure in the trees, watching. No note, no signature, just that photo. To be continued. If this chapter stunned you with hidden truths and chilling threats, next chapter will unravel the dark tail end of Margaret's battle. Like, comment, and subscribe now. The real ending is closer than you think. I held the photo with trembling hands. It wasn't just a picture. It was a message. A warning. Maybe even a promise. Someone had been watching me at Dennis' grave. Someone who wanted me to know that even now, even after Lorraine's arrest and the press conference that lit the country on fire, this wasn't over. I showed the photo to Evelyn. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers gripping the edge of the image like she wanted to tear it in half. There's someone else, she whispered. Someone still out there. Layla arrived within the hour. We gave her the photo, and her jaw tightened the moment she saw it. "I've got a bad feeling about this," she muttered. "You were supposed to be in protective custody when this was taken. This means someone got close again." I nodded hollow. "I'm tired, Layla. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder." She knelt beside me, her voice low. "You've survived more than most people could even imagine. You've exposed a criminal network, buried a fake husband, confronted your long-lost daughter, and put your son behind bars." I blinked back tears. "I didn't want to bury my family." "But you didn't bury them," she said. "You buried the lies." That night, I sat on the porch of the safe house, Evelyn beside me, the weight of everything pressing on us like an invisible hand. And then my phone rang. A blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. There was silence at first. Then a voice I hadn't heard in decades. "Hello, Margaret." My blood ran cold. "Dennis." Or rather, the voice of Dennis. "Impossible," I said. "You're dead." The voice chuckled softly. "Not quite. But someone's been pretending I was." "No," I whispered, shaking. Then the voice changed, dropped the act. Became someone else. "You should have stayed quiet," the man said. "Now everything's falling apart. And it's all because you couldn't just die peacefully." I stood up, trembling. "Who is this?" "Check your porch tomorrow," he said. "We left you a gift." The line went dead. Evelyn grabbed the phone. "What did they say?" But I couldn't speak. I didn't sleep. When dawn came, I opened the front door. There on the welcome mat was a small wooden box. No return label. No markings. I picked it up, my heart pounding. I opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny porcelain figurine. Librarian. Just like the one I kept on my desk for 40 years at Willow Creek Public Library. The original one had been buried with Dennis. Or so I thought. I dropped the box. "Someone dug up his grave," I whispered. Evelyn gasped. "What?" "They're trying to tell me that nothing is sacred anymore." I called Layla. This time she brought the full team. They went to the cemetery. The groundskeeper was missing. So was the night guard. Dennis' grave. Disturb. The coffin had been tampered with. And closed again. We didn't tell the press. Not yet. Because this wasn't about public exposure anymore. This was about personal revenge. And then, a new name entered the investigation. Cliff Ryerson. Former colleague of Lorraine Finch. A silent partner in her schemes. Disbarred years ago for malpractice. Rumored to have faked his death in a boating accident 6 years prior. His records showed he had worked on my estate once. Under Whitaker. He was the one who had helped forge Dennis' posthumous documents. He was the reason my will had been vulnerable in the first place. And now he was back. Layla told us Cliff was likely the voice on the phone. The one orchestrating the threats. The one feeding Carla her every move. And the man in the photo. Possibly him. But he was a ghost. No known address, no social media, no bank records. Until Evelyn had an idea. "We use me as bait," she said. I shook my head. "Absolutely not. I'm the daughter. I've stayed quiet in the media. If I suddenly make a public statement, say something controversial, they might come for me next. It'll draw him out. Too risky." "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "And neither should you be." We agreed to do it carefully. With protection. With surveillance. She went on live television. Spoke about how my family had betrayed me, but how there are people still out there who helped cover it up and still haven't been brought to justice. It was subtle, but it worked. 3 nights later, the safe house security cameras caught a figure outside her window. He never entered, but he left something. A single sheet of paper. "You're next. Keep her quiet. Or we will." He knew we were watching. Layla made a decision. "This ends now," she said. "We go on the offensive." The FBI raided 2 properties linked to Cliff. The first was empty. The second, booby trap, rigged to burn the moment they broke the door. The fire destroyed everything. But not before one agent saw a board of photos, tacked to the wall, just before the flames took over. Photos of me. From years ago. From last week. One of me sleeping in my bed. He had been inside the house. While I slept. That night I cracked. I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. I had fought for months. For justice. For truth. For peace. But Cliff Ryerson was a devil I couldn't seem to corner. Until Evelyn found a clue we had all missed. Cliff had a sister. She lived in New Mexico. Off-grid. A nurse who had once worked in hospice care. Just like Carla had claimed in her interviews. Layla contacted local authorities. They tracked her down. And in her barn they found Cliff. Alive. Disguised. Armed. He tried to run. He didn't make it 10 feet before they brought him down. And as they dragged him to the car, he screamed my name. You think this is over, Margaret? It's never over. I watched the footage later. And I didn't blink once. But that night, I found another letter. Slipped under the safehouse door. No handwriting. Just one line typed. You buried one husband. Are you ready to bury another? And this time, it was signed, Martin. If your heart skipped a beat reading that final line, wait until next chapter. The final confrontation is coming. Like, comment and subscribe. The ending will leave you breathless. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity. You buried one husband. Are you ready to bury another? Martin. My hands trembled as I held the paper. I read it over and over again, praying that I had misunderstood. But the letters stayed the same. The signature was clear. My son. My blood. The boy I raised and fed and kissed goodnight for years, threatening to become the final shadow in this long storm of betrayal. Evelyn saw the look on my face before I said a word. She didn't ask. She simply walked over, took the letter and read it. Her breath caught in her throat. He didn't. He did, I said, my voice hollow. She backed away slowly, her jaw clenched. He signed it. I thought I already lost him, I whispered. But this means I never had him to begin with. Agent Layla and her team arrived 10 minutes later. They examined the letter, scanned the house, checked the door, the perimeter. No fingerprints. No surveillance footage. Just like before. Martin was bailed out, Layla said quietly. We thought he was laying low. But this is a declaration. She turned to me, her voice cautious. We need to prepare for the worst, Margaret. If he really is aligning with Cliff's circle, then your son may be more involved than any of us realized. I didn't answer. I just stood there, feeling the slow, deliberate collapse of my heart. That night, I found an old photo tucked between the pages of my Bible. It was from Martin's 6th birthday. Him covered in chocolate cake, sitting on Dennis' lap, laughing like life would always be that simple. I pressed it to my chest and cried until I couldn't breathe. But the grief was soon replaced with something sharper. Resolve. I'm ending this, I said the next morning. Not with revenge, but with the truth. For everyone to see. Evelyn nodded. I'll be right beside you. We called a press conference. This time not to expose someone but to confess. I stood before the cameras, the lights glaring against my wrinkled skin and tired eyes. I'm not a victim anymore, I began. I'm a survivor. Of lies. Of theft. Of manipulation. And yes, of my own family's betrayal. I told them everything. The fake marriage. The stolen funds. The forged documents. The secret daughter. The neighbor. The lawyer. The threats. I named names. I showed receipts. And finally, I addressed my son. Martin, if you're watching this, I want you to know something. Forgive you. But I don't trust you. And I won't protect you from the consequences of your choices. If you've decided to become part of this wicked legacy, then you'll face the full weight of justice. The video went viral within hours. And then, Martin called. I let it go to voicemail. But he left a message. You destroyed me, Mom. I had no choice. They were going to cut me out. Carla promised me something. Cliff promised me everything. And you, his voice cracked, you took it all away. He ended with chilling words. If I can't have your fortune, no one will. Layla placed me under full-time protection. We relocated to a government safe house in a remote area. But I didn't feel safe. Because betrayal that deep doesn't come from the outside. It bleeds from within. Then 3 days later Layla called. We found Martin. He had broken into one of my old properties, a vacation cottage by the lake. He had rigged it with gasoline and propane, leaving behind a manifesto in a notebook titled, Justice. I was going to burn it all, he'd written. The house, name, the legacy. But it's too late. She already burned me. He was arrested. Again. But this time he didn't fight. He looked into the officer's eyes and said, Tell her. I was never enough. When I received the report, I collapsed in Evelyn's arms. My baby, I whispered. What happened to my baby? She held me tightly, rocking me like I had once rocked her. And slowly the truth set in. My family wasn't destroyed because of greed alone. It was broken long before, by silence, by pride, by secrets we buried to keep peace. But now, there was nothing left to hide. Months passed. The case against Lorraine led to the shutdown of a nationwide exploitation ring. Carla received a 30-year sentence with no possibility of parole. Joseph died of a stroke in prison. Whitaker was permanently disbarred and is now serving time for financial conspiracy. Elise. She wrote me a letter, apologizing, blaming Carla, blaming loneliness, blaming everyone but herself. I never wrote back. Martin. He was sentenced to 5 years with psychiatric supervision. I didn't attend the sentencing. I couldn't bear to look into his eyes again. Instead, I started writing. My memoir, The Quiet Power of a Woman Who Lost Everything, became a surprise bestseller. I used the earnings to launch a foundation that protects elderly women from financial and emotional abuse. We called it Maggie's Voice. Because I finally found mine. Evelyn runs the day-to-day operations. She's found peace in purpose. I found peace in letting go. I still visit Dennis' grave every Sunday. And now I bring 2 flowers. One for him. And one for the little boy I once knew, who never came back. But in the end, I survived. I rose. Not for revenge, but for redemption. And for every woman out there who thinks she's too old to start again. You are not done. You are not broken. You are still everything. If this story broke your heart, lit your fire, or made you believe again in the quiet strength of a woman, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too.